People expect to be engulfed by prairie, the sheer scope of it overwhelming them in an ocean of endless blooms. Alongside a massive open prairie expanse, our human realm gets humbled in comparison. People think of color and movement, sunshine and wind, wave after wave of swaying grasses, riptides of billowing blossoms, an ebb and flow of bees, birds, and undulating seed heads, with a sky the size of the Pacific arching above it all. It's easy to see prairie on a colossal scale, an immensity of acres stretching to a vast horizon. When people think of prairie, they don't think about this. In fact, skyscrapers and cityscapes, public art and factories, heavy industry and transportation hubs just don't come to mind at all. 90% of Iowa's landmass at one time was home to the sort of tall grass varieties we know today: big bluestem, Canada wild rye, Indian grass. This lasted 4,000 to 6,000 years. With settlement came tillage. Global food production of an industrial magnitude would be Iowa's inescapable fate. In practical terms, this meant the ceaseless and ongoing eradication of immense tracts of ironweed, compass plants, rattlesnake master, and little blue. Today, not even 1% of the original prairie remains. Think of it as a biome of native species that almost went extinct. Think of it as a living vestige of the ancient past, something that had, through its own herbaceous vitality, adapted to thrive in a changeable climate like ours. Think of more than 300 types of plants, countless insect species, and innumerable microbes threaded together in one durable, functional tapestry that could both filter groundwater and nourish the soil. Think of how many living things associated with prairie were, through human actions, practically driven to extinction. The buffalo, prairie dogs, the plants themselves. Now, imagine a large prairie landscape, 5,000 acres, 7,000 acres. Scale this back and shrink it down so that it fits into a neighborhood parcel of less than a quarter acre. A tiny riot of 50 diverse species. Naturally, the prairie doesn't know it's standing in a city. An urban setting creates an opportunity to image prairie in a dramatic new way. Instead of sweeping vistas of grand panoramic dimensions, we find discrete patches, beds, and pocket-sized plots, a personal prairie tucked away in an ordinary backyard. There isn't space for 1,000 lead plants dotting a pathway to the horizon, for instance. In fact, there may be no horizon at all beyond the neighbor's chain-link fence and a bored dog barking incessantly. For all the complexities of municipal life and infrastructure and management of utilities, nothing about a city changes the ideal conditions for prairie, except the actual space itself, acre by acre, land the buildings and streets actually occupy. When we talk about the urban jungle, we mean a kind of behavior and even a crime rate more than a kind of place. But an urban prairie is all about place, the grass blades swaying kind of place, the bees buzzing place, the place where pink and gold petals flutter like birthday party confetti above your head. Think of a zoo, not for exotic animals, but for grasses and forbs. That's the personal-sized backyard prairie. A zoo might have one Bengal tiger, one elephant. Zoos are kind of sad. A peewee prairie hints at the grandeur of its native self without bumming anyone out, chiefly because a backyard has sun and sky and wind, all the essential elements, just in miniature. Like the city in which it stands, the urban prairie is the work of human hands. We cleared the space. It might have been a bed of tulips or a tomato garden or just opportunistic weeds. We cleared that space, sowed the seeds, whether scattering them by hand or scratching them down into the soil. We transplanted the rootstock, choked out the weeds, watered the vulnerable seedlings, and carefully cultivated everything. We put the prairie there. A coneflower that now produces its own seed is one that probably began its life indoors in a 4-inch pot in February, when hardly anyone was even thinking about prairie. And then it sat for months on a sunny greenhouse windowsill before finding its home in an urban backyard. If not for various assists like this, if not for this degree of mindful and deliberate intervention, the backyard plot might be nothing more than a tangle of creeping Charlie and Bermuda grass. So maybe you get only one lead plant the entire summer, one royal catchfly, one mallow. A compact urban prairie creates an intimacy that on any given day includes not only a solitary culver's root bravely representing its species all by itself, but the honking of car horns, the roar of planes landing at a nearby airport, and the occasional thrash of a weed eater. Not that the bees mind this. One clump of wild bergamot may produce 100 button-sized flowers or more, and it draws bees from all over. The tireless tiny machines obey an internal programming that has them showing up in a big way for this lavender feast. Day after day, the sun-filled hours repeat this story. By early August, once the prairie bouquet has reached its zenith, some of the bees will camp out on the blossoms overnight, motionless on the underside of the petals, sleeping at the nectar source. When the sunlight and warmth reach them, they grow active again and begin their single-minded harvest. Prairie is a type of wildness, then, even when it finds its place within city limits. It invites wildness, necessitates wildness, includes wildness in all of its dimensions. What we see above ground, the insect life, and what we don't see below ground, the rhizome-level bacteria and fungi that thrive there. Prairie plants have notably long roots. A grass like Big Blue, which can attain heights of 6 feet or more above ground, may have a root mass occupying twice that depth underground. There's almost a hiddenscape aspect to prairie when you consider how significant the subterranean growth and presence is. Summer days cascade forward, and it's hard to believe the sunlight will ever dim or the heat ever abate, the colors fade, or the greens and golds grow thin and dry. But they will. There's a sameness to the city where the prairie stands. Car horns, machinery, sirens, traffic noise. The shorter days of autumn don't change this. The city seems not to pay attention to the seasons, while the prairie faithfully records dramatic life cycle changes down to minute details. A sunny day in October is followed by several moody, cloudy days, and the winds increase, the better to disperse seed. Where bees once visited the flowers, birds now flit from cone to cone, chowing down. This seed is destined for a sunny couple of acres 50 miles away, a former alfalfa field, one-time grazing land for cattle. It will be part of a prairie restoration project that will take at least 3 years to bring to full fruition. The seed may not germinate in the first year, maybe not even in the second year. The seeds of native species keep their own counsel. They can hang out in the soil and wait for the right conditions. A A blizzard rages through, and snowplows grind along the streets, clearing pavement, and the urban prairie thrashes in a torment of wind and cold. Each successive storm scatters more seed on the snow. Winter seems to be a desolate time of year, a brutal, lifeless, and brittle season whose long, bitter nights cause our thoughts to turn toward death. The prairie slumps in its own wreckage and falls over, its twisted clumps and broken stems creating sheltered pockets for voles and mice, far away from the hunting gaze of an owl or a hawk. Up above, where the prairie ruins remain, the city blares and traffic snarls. But far beneath the frost line, the longest roots rest in the absolute darkness of deep, frozen earth. They slumber their way toward a time of joyous awakening and life once more.